It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, digging into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is Jason Redman, and we're going to be discussing his brand new book, Overcome: Crush Adversity with the Leadership Techniques of America's Toughest Warriors. Jason, welcome to the show.
Shaun, thanks for having me on.
Well, this is your first time on the podcast, so let's start off our conversation today with a bit of the Jason Redman origin story. So for the listeners, the viewers encountering you for the very first time, what are a few things they need to know about you?
My story, what I love the most about my story when I hear people say is that was not what I expected. And I love it when I hear that. So my story is a redemption story. I think everybody thinks, oh, Navy SEALs, they're these supermen, these superhuman individuals. And the reality is we are not. And I definitely was not. I made some mistakes along the way. I was a kid that came into the SEAL teams or came into the Navy at 17 years old. Made it through SEAL training when I was 19 and, young and immature, but smart and did well as a young SEAL. Found myself moving up in the leadership spectrum and started to make some mistakes. And really those mistakes were driven by arrogance and ego as those two dangerous allies if you're not careful in how they walk with you. And for me, those things kind of reached up and started choking me out. And I made some poor decisions, really not acting as I should as a leader, specifically a leader within a special operations unit. And all of it kind of culminated with a bad call on a mission in Afghanistan in 2005 that nobody was lost. Nobody was injured or killed. I think the only thing that was injured or killed was my professional reputation. And oftentimes I bring this up and people are like, well, what happened? I made a call. I was in an overwatch position on a mission to basically push through a valley to flush Taliban fighters out of a pretty hardened valley that we had gone into. And we encountered those fighters. I was overseeing a unit that was up on the high ground above, a ground unit pushing through. They got into a firefight later in the day, and I made a decision to move down to support them with another individual. I'll stay away from all the intricate details and tactics. The bottom line, it wasn't a very good decision. And I got called on the carpet because of that decision. And instead of owning it and just saying, you know what, you're right, that was a bad call, that probably would have been the end of it. But instead, I fought back. Like, unfortunately, sometimes we do as leaders. If you're a little insecure, maybe you're not willing to take some constructive criticism or look at the entire picture. And that's kind of what happened to me. And it led me down this pretty hard path where I found myself at a crossroads where, I had some guys that were like, hey, kick this guy out. He's dangerous. He's making some bad decisions, which started a whole new journey for me where I really had to come to grips with what it is to be a leader and who I was and my own ego and arrogance and all these things. And it took about 2 years really to climb back out of that hole and earn back the trust of my teammates and earn back my credibility as a leader. Finally did that, was excelling, got my career back on track, deployed to Iraq, and a very volatile time in Iraq in the summer of 2007. Very successful deployment as a SEAL. And right at the very end of that deployment, we were 1 week from going home, and I got caught, led a mission that I was caught in a Al-Qaeda ambush. And I was hit 8 times in that gunfight between my body and body armor. Severely injured, 2 rounds to the left elbow and a round to the face. That started a whole new journey of coming to understand what it is to lead and deal with adversity. But because I had been through this other hard journey of building myself back, I kind of felt like, well, you know what? I'm ready for this journey. Bring it on. And really just focused on being positive, driving forward. So something happened shortly after I was in the hospital. I put a sign on my hospital door, a bright orange sign that ended up going viral, getting national attention, even garnering the attention of the President of the United States at that time, President George Bush. It earned me a trip to the White House to meet him in the Oval Office. But that sign kind of became a launch point for me as an individual who overcame a lot. And I kind of became known as the overcome guy. And that sign became a statement for wounded warriors and individuals all across the country. To this day, at least hundreds of thousands of individuals have found that sign. And I've had everybody from accident survivors to cancer patients to lots of other wounded warriors who have taken that sign and posted it on their door, on their hospital door, and that's what I call it, is the sign on the door. So that really kind of is the nexus of my story. And now I'm out there. My first book, The Trident, which went on to be a New York Times bestseller, is all about that journey, that journey of leadership from failure to redemption to massive injury to recovery, interlaced with the love story of my wife, who was right there next to me, and really such a powerful part of my team, as we went through this journey. And, completed my military career, started a nonprofit to help wounded warriors, and really started to get out there speaking and helping other individuals. And which fast forward to where we are today, now getting out there teaching leadership and this overcome mindset and this get off the X methodology, which is everything that my second book is about.
Well, and in terms of the story behind the book, I know every writing journey has a beginning, and obviously you're doing training and coaching in this area. What was kind of that genesis or ignition point where you got set down the path of writing Overcome? How did you know you were ready to write this second book?
So in some ways it had already written itself, but really what drove it was, I like to say, or what I've told people is Overcome was 12 years in the making. Because I will say that the lessons that started everything that goes into Overcome started in that hospital bed in 2007. And what it was is, as I was recovering and as I was going through this journey and becoming the Overcome guy, people would ask me, what is the Overcome mindset? How do I have the Overcome mindset? And I could give them answers, but I could not give them a definitive step-by-step process on how to implement that in their own lives. And I'll be honest, I don't know if I fully understood myself back then. So as I went down this path and I started working with other wounded warriors, I started meeting other individuals who had been through massive trauma. I was writing and I was putting into different content. And a lot of this went into a program that I started for wounded warriors with our nonprofit called the Overcome Academy. And it was a 2-week leadership program to teach wounded warriors how to move forward in the civilian world after they suffered these injuries with, a lot of the same things that I had been through. And it was a combination of that, a combination of really starting to dig deep into what was that step-by-step process. If I could boil it down into, actionable items that I implemented and that I watched other wounded warriors and other individuals that have been through trauma implement to move past it, what were those things? And that's really what became the genesis of Overcome. It was a combination of the Overcome Academy curriculum. It was a combination of many of the things that I had witnessed and worked with other wounded warriors and people who had been through trauma. And it was a combination of the journey that I had been through over the last 12 years, from the leadership failure to the injury and recovery, and even to starting my own business, running that nonprofit. And and I'll tell you, there was one other additional incident that I talk about in the book. A lawsuit we got into, a business proposal deal that kind of went south with some friends. And unfortunately, it turned very ugly. And there was a lot of lessons I learned out of that, from leadership and how we deal with things. So all of that came together to make Overcome. And it was a lot of fun. So when I say the book had already written itself, by the time I actually sat down to write the book, and I got a friend of mine that helped me write also. We kind of laid it out in the structure. He was a smart guy, but I had all the content already done. I had already written so much, and as a matter of fact, I have so much content. There'll probably be some follow-on books after this one. But that's what all went into making this book what it is.
Well, in terms of this message, it sounds like you started out as a way to help wounded warriors, but I'm curious, at what point did you see that this message would be applicable to really just about anybody? Like, when did you realize you actually had a much broader audience that would benefit from this?
It happened. So, Shaun, it happened on multiple fronts. One front was obviously I was starting to get out there more and more and speak to companies and businesses and even law enforcement and fire. And the message was resonating across the spectrum. And then the second point that really hit me was on the second Overcome Academy that we ran. One of the wounded warriors who ended up becoming a friend, I actually profile him in the book, came up to me and he said, "Man," he said, the lessons in this are so powerful. He said, "It's exactly what I needed." But he said, "These aren't veteran lessons." He said, these are human lessons." He's like, "Anybody could do well with this." And it was at that point that I thought, man, this is true. And I tell you, we were kind of struggling with the nonprofit on the future growth and fundraising and all those things. And all of that kind of came together with a decision point for me. And I said, man, I really feel like I got a second chance to after my firefight and obviously everything that happened, that near-death experience. And I thought, man, there's a lot of great stuff here. And I think everybody in life struggles. That really was the foundational level of this book. And it was the foundational level of the Overcome Academy, which was a big part of what made this book, is that I survived an enemy ambush, but everybody gets ambushed in life. One of the hard things about being human is we all struggle. We all have these hard moments that come along and just knock us off our feet, whether it's an unexpected relationship ending, whether it's a business failure, lawsuit, bankruptcy, whether it's unexpected illness or injury that comes along on us or someone we love, sexual trauma, unexpected loss of someone. All these things hit us with the same force as that enemy ambush that I got hit with in Iraq. And although it may not be bombs or bullets that are impacting your body, they're the bombs and bullets of life. And you feel almost no different than if you were in an actual firefight. And sometimes what I try and explain to people is actually the mental bombs and bullets and the emotional bombs and bullets are actually worse than the physical ones. So all of that came together. It made me realize that everybody in life gets ambushed. And if I can help people get off the X, and that's a phrase in the book that denotes the point of attack, the point of incident, which everybody in life tends to get stuck on that point for longer than they need to, then I'm helping them to move forward and become the best version of themselves despite this incident. And that's become my new goal.
Talk to us about the overcome mindset. Like what is the overcome mindset that kind of what do I want to say that? I don't know. Tell us about the overcome mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. So the overcome mindset is a big part of what I talk about. And the overcome mindset is this idea that it doesn't matter what adversity comes along in your life. If you already have this mindset, you're going to overcome it. It may not be the outcome that you initially think it's going to be. And oftentimes people really get wrapped around the axle because they focus so hard on this is the only outcome I'll settle for. And oftentimes life doesn't unfold that way. Obstacles and roadblocks and dead ends come along, and we don't have the ability to get to that end state that we had in our mind. And that's where a lot of people get stuck and quit but if you're willing to truly take a step back, now you have the ability. I explain the overcome mindset as we have a group of individuals in the military and law enforcement called breachers. And a breacher's job is to get inside a hardened building. So their job is to go through locked doors or to go through a wall, to go through windows. And we teach them all kinds of skills to be an effective breacher. We teach them how to use different tools, how to pick locks. Within the military, we teach them how to use explosives, and even at a very surgical level, on how to even change the way blast waves occur so that they can push debris down into the ground if we have, for instance, hostages on the other side of the door. The interesting thing about all the tactics and techniques we teach them, the most important thing we teach them is mindset. We teach them it doesn't matter what door or wall or obstacle they come up against, they're going to get to the other side. whether they have to go around it, whether they have to climb over it, whether they have to dig under it, or whether they go destructively through it. Somehow they're going to get to the other side. And when you start to build this mindset that it doesn't matter what problem or adversity comes upon your path, if you know it's an opportunity, you'll find a way. You will figure it out. And that's really what the overcome mindset is. And if you can build that mindset within yourself, even though those hard moments are coming, already you're starting to think, okay, let's roll through the process of how we get to the other side, or at least get to another point.
Well, in the kind of the main guts, the meat of the book, you break that down into 4 parts, and those are survive, lead yourself, lead others, and lead always. And to kind of capture the essence of that, I thought it might be helpful for you to maybe illustrate that with a story. So if you want to walk us through the 4 parts or 4 stages, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah. So the way the book was broken down was the first part, survive, is built on this idea that if you're in a life ambush right now, if maybe you're listening to this podcast and you've had something catastrophic happen in your life, and when I talk about life ambushes, these are things that will forever leave a scar on you. You'll never fully recover from them, whether it's a mental, emotional, or a physical scar. And sometimes it's a combination of the 3. All of us can look back immediately and say, oh my God, I remember when that happened. And that really sucked. I did not enjoy going through that. But so often when we get to the other side, it also becomes a defining moment for many of us. We look back and we go, wow, it made me better. So right now, if you're out there and you're in a life ambush, something has happened to you, whether it's to you, a close loved one, maybe you've lost your business. The first part of the book is for you. It is a step-by-step process on how we deal with being in a life ambush. And in the military, we talk about immediate action drills. Excuse me. An immediate action drill is something we do if there is an emergency, that right there in that moment, we can have a step-by-step process to deal with it. And we try and be very proactive in our thinking. And we think, okay, if we were to be attacked by a sniper, what would we do? If we were to be ambushed by a team of bad guys, what would we do? If we were to hit an IED, what would we do? These are immediate action drills. And the reality is you can do the same thing in life. And you may not need to get into the details on every single bad thing that can happen. But in the first part, in Survive, we talk about the REACT methodology. And that methodology is a step-by-step process to deal with that crisis you're in. So once you get out of a crisis, we move into parts 2, 3, and 4. And this is how we can be more proactive in dealing with future life ambushes, because what we came to find is the average person will go through 5 major life ambushes over the course of a lifetime. And some people it's more, some people it may be less, but you will go through at least 5 major life ambushes. So if you already have the mindset that this is coming, the big suck is coming, it's not such a shock to the system. And not only that, there are things that you can do to be better prepared for those life ambushes that are coming. So part 2 is all about how do you lead yourself? How do you take care of yourself? This human body we live in is just amazing. But so many people take incredibly poor care of their body. That we get to an age where we stop working out. We have some of the worst nutrition in the world here in America. All this processed food, all these things, we have bought into this totally incorrect idea that we all can get by on only a few hours of sleep a night, which is very untrue and leaves you very unprepared and very stress laden. All these different things. And in the book, I teach something, part 2, I teach something called the Pentagon of Peak Performance. So it's 5 key areas that you have to lead yourself to be better prepared and balanced for the life ambushes that are coming. Part 3 is about leading others. The interesting thing about being in a life ambush, you're never in an ambush alone. When something major happens, your spouse is pulled onto the X with you. Your kids are pulled onto the X with you. Your friends are pulled onto the X with you. If it's a business ambush, your teammates, partners, coworkers, they're on the X with you. So if you understand that, you understand that it's that we all are leaders, and I encourage everybody to be a leader in the book. And the longer you sit on the X, the point of the incident, the point of the bad thing that happened, the harder it is to move forward. It's like quicksand. Well, if everybody's on the X with you, you've got to motivate and lead them off. You've got to be the one that steps up and says, this is where we're going, especially if you are that central focal point of that incident. And then part 4 is, how do we lead always? How do we maintain these things for the long term? How do we have that positive mindset so that we're always ready for these future ambushes that are coming? If you can follow those things, it doesn't matter what ambush comes, you're going to be ready for it, as opposed to most people who are out there who just walk through life in a reactive mode. And when these things come along, they're totally knocked over by them. And they say, oh, I never saw this coming. The reality is, most ambushes, usually there are indicators that they're coming. I mean, every now and then there are things that come along that we just can't predict. But if you have that mindset, you will be ready for them that come.
Well, Jason, thanks for giving us a flyover of the great material that we're going to encounter in the book. I also know that you, I think we mentioned this already, that you have other training and coaching resources. So for the person who reads Overcome and they're like, man, I just want to take this to the next level, I want to go deeper, what other things do you have available for them?
Yeah, so I started a group coaching program called the Overcome Army, and it is a group of like-minded individuals who all want to become the best version of themselves. And all of them have, one of the things that I've come to find from coaching is that all of us have different goals in our lives, but usually there is one goal that's kind of like the albatross. You know, it's the one that we push aside and we don't deal with because it's something that's harder, or maybe we don't want to, maybe we struggle with it. It's one of the bigger struggles. And amazingly, for a lot of people, it comes down to the base level of Pentagon that I teach: physical leadership. If you can start to take care of yourself again, a lot of other things start to fall in place, because there's these intangible properties to taking care of ourselves. We have to build structure. We have to build discipline. We have to get outside of our comfort zone. But the indirect impact of that is you start to feel better and you start to look better and your confidence goes up. And that starts to play into all these other goals that starts to fall in place. So anyways, for all these individuals in my group, we try and identify what is that one thing that is the sticking point that's holding you to on the X at whatever point in your life. And then part of this group, you know, we encourage each other. You're in a closed Facebook Overcome Army group. Once a week, I do a class on all kinds of different subjects, all related to leadership and how we lead ourselves. Currently, we've been going through mental leadership. So we're focused on how do we educate ourselves? How do we get outside of our experiences? Reading, how do we, something that a friend of mine calls time collapsing. How do we identify those experiences that we can get by learning from someone else, whether it's a mentor or reading a book about it? So these are all things we're doing in the Overcome Army. And I will say in 2020, I'm getting ready. I'm working with a company developing some new interactive coaching software that's app-based. So we'd be able to launch an app and there'd be online courses where now we can communicate through the app, and we'd be able to put new content up. For instance, change, or maybe it's teamwork, or maybe it's self-leadership, whatever it is that you can get deeper. And there's some experiential learning where we encourage you to go out and do something, and then we can give feedback on that. So that's part of the Overcome Army in the group. And then obviously, Shaun, I'm out there, I'm speaking to companies all across the country on how I can help make their employees the best. And one of the things that I try to explain to them is oftentimes companies are looking for a speaker that's going to come in and they say, well, we're a sales company, so we want to make better salesmen. And I'm like, I get that. So definitely there's going to be a point you want to bring in somebody that'll teach your people to be better salesmen. But at the end of the day, if they are not solid within who they are, if they are not balanced in what I talk about with the Pentagon and peak performance, when those life ambushes come along, they could be the greatest salesman on the planet. But if they're not balanced, they're going to be totally knocked over. And now you've lost that individual. If we can prepare them to be the best version of themselves, to have that overcome mindset, to be resilient, to understand how to lead themselves, lead others, and lead always, you put that together, you got the combination for a great company.
As we begin to wrap up here, I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't mention that you have a podcast. Tell us a bit about the Overcome and Conquer show and what are listeners going to encounter there?
So the Overcome and Conquer show is a really fun podcast that I do with a teammate of mine, Ray Cashcare. And Ray and I actually went through SEAL training together. We were in the same boat crew, but he and I are about as dynamically different as possible. Ray is this, muscle bound, just very raw, in your face individual. But we're a great balance. We have a lot of fun, but what we talk about is exactly those principles. How do we overcome and conquer in life? And it's all about leadership and how we deal with adversity. So we try and have great guests on who have had to do that. They've led at either a high level or they've had some major adversity that's occurred in their lives that they had to navigate through and get to the other side. So we've had on Taya Kyle, Chris Kyle's wife. We just interviewed Admiral Bill McRaven. We are working on some other really high level. Friend of mine, Bedros Koulian, who I talk about in Overcome, is a multimillionaire and very high level millionaire and billionaire coach. We've interviewed him on the show, and we've interviewed other wounded warriors and amazing individuals. So it is a fun show with great content. Every show we have a word of the day. So the guests that we have on, we ask them, what is the one word that defines you? So like my word obviously is overcome. That would be my word. But for our other guests, they tell us what their word is. And then we dive deep into what makes that word, what makes them, and why is that word important to them. So like I said, it's a fun show. Check us out on iTunes, Overcome and Conquer show. And I think you'll enjoy it.
And Jason, for the listeners who want to find out more about you, your speaking engagements, your books, where are some of the places we can find you on the web?
So jasonredman.com is my main website, and that's you can really find out anything, upcoming events, media, my books, and then it will link you to my getoffx.com website, which is really my coaching website, where you can find out more about the coaching. My online store lives on the coaching website, Get Off X. So if you're looking for some cool Overcome apparel, maybe some military challenge coins, or you want to buy a signed copy of the Trident, all that is on my website. Right now, obviously, with Overcome having just came out on Tuesday, all those sales right now are going through the booksellers. But some point in the future, we'll have Overcome on there for signed copies also.
Well, and like we do with every episode, we'll have detailed links in the show notes, places where you can connect with Jason and pick up your own copy of the book as well. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Jason Redman. Once again, our book today was Overcome, Crush Adversity with the Leadership Techniques of America's Toughest Warriors. For more on Jason and the book, head on over to his website, which again, you can find that at jasonredman.com. And as he said, there's even more to offer over at getoffx.com. And Jason, I just want to say thanks so much for sharing with us today. It's been a great pleasure and an honor to have you on the show.
Shaun, thanks so much for having me, man.